All right, good morning, everybody. A little out of breath. I just had to run up the stairs to make that counter. Take a second. Welcome to another episode of Breakfast with Disaster. We are live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. We have a simple mission. I want to tell you about all the worst things in the world so you know how to avoid them. And we know about that because we work at ServPro, and we're the folks you call when you need help cleaning them up. Today, I've got a pretty serious one, actually, something that's been in the news, and you might have seen this. It has to do with our troops and specifically the Army. If you have ever seen a movie about the Army, then you've probably seen a scene sort of like the one that I'm showing to the right of my head here. It's a drill sergeant bearing down on recruits, lining them up just to scream in their faces as he takes them to task. You might see people running in heavy gear on some sort of grueling run or obstacle course. There's lots of moments like that where being in the Army, and specifically like at a barracks, is a struggle. And we watch these moments, and they dramatize the sheer amount of inner strength that you need to be part of the armed forces. The discipline, the resolve, that's what it takes to hack it. And we watch these scenes and we kind of valorize all of that because we see these struggles as something that is good and is necessary because we know that, as hard as it is for these soldiers' own good. It makes them stronger, better, faster, more capable, better soldiers in general. It has a point. And these soldiers give a ton just to be a part of this organization, be a part of the United States military, and deserve all the respect of the world. And I'm bringing this up with that context because the story that I'm about to share with you, with that in mind, might seem doubly surprising. What's
Good
up?
morning.
What do you need?
I just need one thing from this office and not here anymore. Goodbye.
Bye, love. That's my wife, Nikki. Here's the story that I would like to share with you. It's about a struggle that folks in the Army are dealing with right now that makes them not more capable, but less. And I think you'll see pretty quickly what it has to do with ServPro. There's a recent report, it was in military.com, and they do a lot of reporting on the military. Some of it is pretty investigative in nature. And they've been doing a series on the topic of mold. This article that just got published begins with these words: difficulty breathing, nosebleeds, asthma. The Army has struggled with moldy conditions in its barracks for decades, with reports of infestations blanketing soldiers' rooms and possessions at some installations becoming a frequent topic in the media. But these conditions aren't just unsightly, they're seemingly having a serious impact on the health of America's frontline troops. And here's what this most current article had to say. They went and interviewed 11 soldiers. All of these interviews were anonymous. These soldiers were not cleared to speak to the media. And so, to avoid any sort of retaliation, they were granted anonymity. And all of these soldiers, all 11, claimed to have developed some sort of illness related to the moldy conditions that they were living in. These illnesses varied in severity for sure, but all of them significantly affected the soldier's quality of life. Here's one quote from a junior soldier who was interviewed. He said, I can barely breathe whenever I'm in the room, his room in his barracks. He actually had to move out of the barracks. He started coughing up blood and had to go to the ER, and that was enough to get him out of there. And medical officials did confirm that these issues that these soldiers were dealing with were consistent with exposure to mold, and the mold certainly, if it didn't cause them initially, was certainly exacerbating these. And the individuals that the journalist talked to certainly believed that mold had also caused their illness. Here's what another one said: um, "I feel like I've given a lot to the army. It's hard to be all that you can be if there's mold in your barracks. Ever since I got here, any room I go in, it just feels terrible. It just isn't getting fixed." All these soldiers, by the way, all 11 that spoke to the journalist here, they were stationed either at Fort Stewart in Georgia or at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And both of these barracks have been in the news before for these moldy conditions. In fact, the Army has already published a report on this. They looked at other buildings and stated that at least 2,100 of them had some level of mold growth. To try to deal with that, they bought 3,000 dehumidifiers and issued them to soldiers, though not a single one who was interviewed for this article said they actually got one. How harmful are these moldy conditions really? I think it's worth discussing. Are they really as serious as this article indicates? Well, this is a good place to discuss that here on Breakfast with Disaster. I want to pull specifically from the Cleveland Clinic. It's quoted in the article. It's sort of tied up in all of this. Um, we know that heightened levels of indoor mold growth can be a serious problem. They indicate a serious problem, a problem with the environment, problem with moisture, something is going on. And so we would go back to the Cleveland Clinic, medical professionals to look at this. They're quoted in the article, specifically their article on Sagittarius chartarum, the much feared black mold, because that's sort of what the military.com article indicates that we're dealing with here, though I don't know that they actually have that assessment to back that up. But here's what the Cleveland Clinic says, and it's what we know basically from our own experience. Exposure to heightened levels of mold can sometimes have negative health effects. For most people, these, I agree with you, Kathy, I hate mold too. But for most people, these effects are allergenic. You sneeze, you cough, you itch, you get a bit ill at ease. For most people, that's kind of where it starts and ends. Um, if you have underlying issues, though, or you're exposed for a long period of time, or you have or develop a mold allergy, these effects can be a little bit more pronounced. You might find yourself actually wheezing, coughing, being really short of breath, having real episodes of respiratory distress. You may have a hard time ever catching your breath in or out of that room until the exposure is dealt with. And there are people who are at even higher risk than that. Take someone who's immunocompromised. An allergenic response is, in a sense, your immune system responding to something, maybe overcompensating. Someone who's immunocompromised um, may not be able to respond at all. And so folks like that or others who have underlying conditions can have much more serious outcomes. The one that the Cleveland Clinic specifically talked about is mycosis. It's a fungal infection in the airway, can be very serious. So while in general most people won't suffer very serious reactions, just minor irritants, it is really not healthy or advisable to occupy a space with a serious infestation of mold, especially for an extended period of time. And if that's your barracks, that's exactly what you're doing. It can have a really deleterious effect on your health, as well as just being annoying and really draining to your quality of life. And these are people who are giving so much, who are already putting in so much work and discipline. And this is the sort of trial that does not necessarily make them any better. In fact, it makes them less capable. So it deserves serious study. And in fact, that's what the Army is doing. On one hand, they have done their best, as far as anyone can tell, to acknowledge and mitigate this issue. They've done those reports, they've published those reports, they know that there's a problem. This in itself is sort of an evolution in Army policy. There's a policy expert quote in the article, Catherine Kozeminski, says that the mentality when it came to something like this used to be just suck it up. That's not where we're at as a nation anymore, as an armed forces anymore. Senior leaders are acknowledging that this sort of thing is a problem, and that is a step in itself in the right direction. Here's what's the problem is they are bound up to the resourcing Congress provides. What kind of resources do they provide? It's not nothing. There's about a $1 billion per year that has been set aside in the Army budget, and that is for renovating aging barracks like Fort Stewart, Fort Bragg, the ones that are having this problem. That unfortunately is moving relatively slowly. For all of that money and all of that planning, only 5 new barracks are slated for 2024. That's not a ton of movement on this that may not help anyone who's suffering now. In fact, Fort Stewart, who's named in the article, plans to renovate its barracks. It's not going to be done with that until 2035. So people who are dealing with this problem now are not going to be in that barracks most likely by the time this problem is actually solved. And in general, lawmakers are kind of hesitant to fund something like this. Any money that goes towards, say, quality of life, domestic facilities here, does potentially take away from the lethality of the armed forces uh, who are deployed out in the world. And so, making the decision to invest in these facilities, as dire as the situation might seem, is not something that anyone is taking lightly. That said, there are high ranking officials that are trying to make these improvements a priority, specifically folks like Army Secretary Christine Wormuth. There was a recent House hearing on the Army budget, and she brought this up. She complained about the lack of maintenance staff, the lack of funding. She toured barracks, and she said, quote, she'd seen some that she wouldn't want her own daughters to live in. So while a path forward on this subject is not necessarily clear, uh, it is certainly on officials' radars, and we're going to kind of see how it goes. Um, Really interesting stuff developing there. that I can't really exactly talk about, but I'm hoping that they're able to bring this to some kind of resolution because it is, like Kathy says, we hate mold. We certainly hate mold here at Serve Pro, and to think of folks who are doing so much for us suffering from it needlessly, uh, is a real shame. So hoping that turns out, hoping that there's some sort of action there, and if I have any updates on this, I will certainly let you know. Now we are going to go to our most fun part of the show, the non-moldy part of the show, and that is the prize wheel. And so if you're watching this for the first time, you do not know what this is, it is very simple. We've got folks who are in the Serve Pro Mug Club. They get a really cool coffee mug. It's got a number on the bottom. That number gets registered to this wheel. If I call your number, you win a prize. And if I call your number and you're watching, you win a double prize. Only way for me to know that you're watching is for you to leave me a comment. So say good morning, say um, I hate mold, much like Kathy did. Whatever you need to say to let me know you're here. That way, if I call your number, you get that double prize. It's super cool. Do not miss that opportunity. Let's spin this wheel. And it's going, and it's going, and it's going. Where will it land? In the 200s here. 225. That is going to be Kelly over at Bolts Insurance. So, Kelly, if you're watching, leave us a comment. If you're not, sorry that you don't get your double prize. You still get a single prize, and that's pretty cool too. We'll be back next Tuesday with another broadcast. Who knows what sort of disasters we will be uncovering in the meantime? I'm Dan Bauer, the Serve Pro. It's been a pleasure to hang out with you guys today, and I will see you next week.